Some shows from childhood just stick with you. Maybe they featured your first crush. Maybe they made you laugh. Maybe they were gross. Maybe they scared the hell out of you and scarred you for life. There was one show that did all of this and so much more. A show from a land down under. In the town of Port Noranda, there was a lighthouse on the beach, and in the lighthouse lived the Twists, and they took us on some very strange adventures indeed. My name's Anthony Robin, you can call me Tony, and this is a complete story of Round the Twist, a bizarre, bonkers, brilliant programme. We're going to take a look back at the origins of the show, at its writers and its cast. We're going to talk about all 4 seasons, and how the show was brought back after almost a 10-year gap. We're even going to talk about the show's exciting present, and possibly its future. By the way, if you haven't seen Round the Twist, you can watch it right now on Amazon Prime, or even here on YouTube on the ACTFs Twisted Lunchbox channel. There will be spoilers for this 35-year-old show throughout the video. If you turned on the TV in the 1990s and tuned into Round the Twist, you never knew what you were in for. You could be hunting for Ghost Lost Trousers with Linda and Pete, or looking after a green baby with Bronson, or maybe the Gribble Gang destroyed your brother's glider and you need to win a flying competition with the help of a Mongolian cat hat. The Twist's adventures were always weird and unusual, often funny, occasionally terrifying, and every once in a while, touching. But the presence of the Twist family gave the show a sense of continuity that was lacking from other anthology shows at the time, and the range of characters gave the show a broad appeal beyond the child audience. This wasn't just a kids show, this was quality family viewing. Small kids could relate to Bronson, the youngest Twist who's always hungry. He's still trying to figure out the world, tag along with his older siblings, and feeling hard done by when he's left out. The older kids could relate to Pete and Linda, able to act more independently than Bronson, but often having young love interfere with their adventures. And parents could relate to Tony, a single dad being incredibly patient with his kids' weird and wonderful experiences. The Twists all support each other as they face a barrage of weird, wonderful and wacky events, but they also relentlessly fight, mock and tease each other, making them feel like a genuine, relatable family. And of course, the strange goings on weren't the only issues facing the Twists. They had more down-to-earth issues too. The Gribble Gang were a constant source of harassment and bullying in school, and Mr. Gribble was constantly trying to get Tony evicted from the lighthouse and kick Nell out of her cottage. And on top of all this, the Twists had to worry about their love lives, from getting your first kiss from a ghost girl to trying to find love again in adult life, or even falling in love with a boy who then turns into a mermaid. The course of true love would never run smoothly for the Twists, but for many kids at the time it was some of the more extreme episodes and visuals that made the show so memorable. Maybe as a child you were freaked out by the scarecrow that chased Linda through the lighthouse. Or maybe you were creeped out by Santa Claus. Maybe even now you wake up in the night convinced you can hear a haunted foxtrot crying out for lemons. And if something from the show scarred you for life, leave a comment below. Think of it as group therapy. The episode that left an indelible mark on me was Little Squirt, a season 2 episode where Bronson is struggling with a peeing contest. During the episode, a local water spirit blames Bronson for the rocks being dumped in its lake and harasses him whenever he's around water. By the end of the episode, Bronson is able to get Mr. Gribble to clean up the lake, and the spirit rewards Bronson by making him pee hard enough to get his stream right over the toilet wall. After this scene, my friend's mum turned off the TV and banned her from watching the show. Now throughout this video, I'm going to talk more about the show, the cast and some fun facts. I'm going to talk about how the show changed from season to season and highlight some of its best episodes. But first, let's go back to the beginning, the very conception of Round the Twist. The Australian Children's Television Foundation was set up in the 1980s. The ACTFs founder, Patricia Edgar, wanted to produce high-quality children's entertainment that was uniquely Australian, and she found inspiration when she was given one of Paul Jennings' books. Jennings was already a popular Australian children's author when the ACTF approached him to option his stories for television. Paul Jennings had one condition. He wanted to write the scripts. Paul Jennings had never written scripts before, so Patricia Edgar teamed him up with Esmond Storm, an experienced writer and director. In interviews, Paul talks warmly about his time working with Esmond Storm. Paul had a steep learning curve to adapt his fiction writing to script writing. He would submit scripts to Storm only to have them come back with large parts crossed out and needing to be rewritten. You can see an example of one of these submitted scripts with Storm's original notes on it in the paperback tie-in that was released about the same time as the first series. Jennings said he often had to rewrite scripts up to 12 times before Storm was satisfied. But this constant writing and rewriting, together with ideas and input from Esmond Storm, resulted in tighter and better scripts. Jennings was able to use many of his existing stories as a basis for episodes, making adjustments for TV and the new family that would be the focus of the show. And this is where the magic of the show really began, with Patricia Edgar's academic knowledge of the audience, Esben Storm's experience, and Paul Jennings' stories all coming together to create the foundation that the show would be built on. Patricia Edgar had served on many government boards, with a focus on creating codes of practice for children's television. Patricia Edgar knew that in order to engage the broad audience they were aiming for, you needed a range of older and younger kids, as well as a balance of genders. Esben Storm was a director, actor, screenwriter and editor. His experience was essential. Not only did he coach Jennings on how to write scripts, but he also knew when something would be unfilmable or too expensive. And all of this knowledge and experience could then be filtered through Paul Jennings' wild imagination to create some really original and engaging scripts. Patricia Edgar had secured funding by selling the show to both Channel 7 in Australia and the BBC in the UK. Notably, French television had turned down the programme, horrified at the pee-pee, poo-poo humour of the show. With the funding already in place, they were able to work on the show without the interference of the networks, something Patricia Edgar says would be impossible today. This freedom allowed them to push the boundaries of children's television, with Patricia Edgar stating that they were not interested in creating role models and nice children, but they were looking for what was funny and engaging. And after more than a year of script writing, they had 13 episodes ready to film. The strength of the scripts got the cast and crew really excited, and Esben Storm's experience again paid off during filming, his endless energy and easy manner being considered the driving force behind much of the creativity of the show. He directed more than half of the episodes of the first season of the show, but everyone involved seemed to be able to have a creative contribution, with both actors and crew able to make line suggestions. Paul Jennings writes in his Round the Twist book that it was difficult for him at first to get used to people making changes to his stories, but it's just something you get used to in television. The indoor scenes of the show were filmed at Melbourne Film Studios. The show's setting of Port Noranda is a fictional town, so filming outdoor scenes took place in various locations throughout Victoria. The kids' school, Port Noranda State School, was filmed at the real-life Williamstown Primary School, which is now a registered building of historical significance. Not because it was featured on Round the Twist, but because it is a great example of Queen Anne revival architecture. But the show's most famous location is the lighthouse. The twist home in the show, the lighthouse is an icon of the programme, appearing in the opening credits, on the covers of books and DVDs, and even in the advertising for the Round the Twist musical. But at one point in the scripting, the twists were not going to live in the iconic lighthouse. Jennings originally planned to have the family living in a prefabricated house that would be delivered to the cliffside at the beginning of the show, with the Twist family sitting at the kitchen table as the building was assembled around them. But he was told that this would be too expensive to shoot. And a good job too, as I don't think anyone can imagine the show without the lighthouse. The exterior filming of the lighthouse took place at the Split Point Lighthouse at Ayers Inlet. This lighthouse was built in 1891 and stands 34 metres tall. The lighthouse is now available to tourists, and guided tours of the lighthouse are now available, including the history of the local area and stories of the filming of Round the Twist, as long as you pre-book. The inside of the real Split Point Lighthouse is just a spiral staircase, so the inside shots of the Twist home were filmed at Melbourne Film Studios. The show was first shown, not in Australia, but in the UK. The BBC had been one of the first buyers and provided early funding for the programme. They launched the show in April 1990, at the end of their children's programming block and just before Neighbours. Neighbours was an Australian soap opera that was incredibly popular in the UK at the time, and helped by this premium slot, Round the Twist found an enthusiastic audience in the UK. However, when the show launched in Australia in August, it did not receive the same favourable treatment. Despite the money they had spent on the show and the great ratings it was receiving in the UK, Channel 7 scheduled the programme at 8:30 AM on a Sunday morning, a TV dead slot. This choice was criticised at the time, not just by the show's creators, but by Laurie Masterson, writing for TV Week. Quote, "How many other Australian series which cost $3 million have been shown at 8:30 AM Sundays? If this is a new trend in programming, it requires an explanation." It is a true testament to the show that it found its audience in Australia, despite Channel 7's attempt to bury it. The show was so successful that audiences wanted more. The ABC channel in Australia brought a second series, and also brought the rights to rerun the first series. Oh, and you remember how French television passed on the show? French students who saw the show on holiday began a letter writing campaign to get the show broadcast in France. Vive la France! Season 1, the first season of the show, introduces us to the Twist family and the town of Port Noranda. The show hit the ground running, immediately establishing the format it would use throughout all 4 seasons. Episodes would focus on a main storyline, often highlighting one character from the Twist family, but always with the other characters involved somehow, either with their own minor storyline or supporting the main focus character of the episode. The focus character would shift from week to week. This allowed the show to remain as an ensemble piece without a main character, and helped to maintain the broad audience that the show was aiming for. The first season of the show is the darkest. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't dwell on negative aspects, and there's plenty of levity and light-hearted moments, but more than half the episodes in the first series feature ghosts, many of whom have regrets or things they need to do or recover before they can move on. And the Gribbles are at their most aggressive this season, being solely focused on getting the Twists out of the lighthouse and Nell out of her cottage. Plus, a couple of the stories end up with the characters in such a bad position that they have to cop out and reveal it was all just a dream. The running storyline for season 1 is the music coming from the top of the lighthouse. The Twists constantly hear music but can never find anyone playing it. The music ultimately turns out to be being played by the ghosts of Nell's dead relatives. Nell has a really hard time this season. She's just lost the lighthouse as the Twists move in, and the Gribbles are constantly trying to kick her out of her cottage. She's forced to sell things from her past to keep the Gribbles from the door. A painting, a ruby, and it's only after seeing her family at the end of the season that she's able to move on with her life. Something that almost didn't happen. Paul Jennings originally planned to kill Nell off in the final episode, having her rejoin her family in the afterlife, but fortunately he was convinced that that ending would be too depressing for the show. By the way, was I the only one who thought that Nell was the Twist grandma when I was a kid? Now let's have a closer look at the first episode of season 1, Skeleton on the Dunny. My plan is to choose one episode to represent each season in this video, and maybe mention a couple of other episodes that really stand out. But if you want to hear my thoughts on every episode, then check out my companion video where I rank and review every episode of Round the Twist. If you're watching this show in the future, it might be out now. If it's not out yet, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so YouTube will let you know when it's available. Skeleton on the Dunny, the very first episode of Round the Twist, seems like a great place to start. And the first thing I want to mention are these awesome title screens they do for every episode. They don't always relate directly to what happens in the show, but they always have a quick scene or sequence that they put the title over. They could have just had plain text on a black screen or static image, but this is emblematic of the extra effort that was put into the show. Here we see a skeleton on the dunny. Enjoy it. There will be no actual skeletons on dunnies in the show proper. Also, we have the use of dunny in the title of the first episode, the Aussie slang immediately demonstrating the strong sense of Australian identity that Patricia Edgar wanted to get over through the ACTF. The show proper opens with the Twist family driving to their new home, all singing Twist and Shout, which is cute. We have Tony Twist, or Dad, played by Richard Moore. Moore had previously worked in films and television, including Prisoner Cell Block H, The Challenge, and later Welcome to Whoop Whoop and Law of the Land. Pete Twist is wearing shades to show he's 90s cool. Pete is played by Sam Vanderberg. Sam also appeared in Blue Heelers, which seems to be a requirement for all Australian actors. And he went on to work in the music industry. Bronson Twist is played by Rodney McLean. He had other child acting roles, including Neighbours and Ocean Girls. Rodney has put acting behind him and has requested to be out of public life. Fair enough. Linda Twist on the end is played by Tamsin West. Tamsin had previously starred in Jenny Kiss Me and The Legend of Frog Dreaming. She would later appear in Neighbours and Blue Heelers. And yes, if you know, I can already hear you typing in the comments. Tamsin West sung the theme song for Round the Twist, and she nailed it. Tamsin still sings in jazz clubs in Melbourne. Her studies and career led to her becoming a speech therapist. The Twists are moving to Port Naranda from the big city. Tony is very positive about the move, but the kids can see signs of trouble. And Bronson's dropping nasty farts in the cab. 1 minute into the first episode and we already have Bronson's first pong. As they arrive, Bronson spots the dunny and runs over, but the door is locked, until it opens by itself, and no one's inside. Very spooky. By the lighthouse, Linda can hear music coming from above, but Nell throws open the door and claims she can't hear anything. As I said earlier, Nell has a hard time this season, so she's not too friendly when the Twists turn up to take over the lighthouse. Nell is played by Bunny Brooke. Brooke was a well-known and well-loved Australian actress, appearing in movies and soaps. Her roles included Flo Patterson in the soap Number 96, Aunt Jennifer in the film Alison's Birthday, and Vi Patterson in another soap, E Street. Behind the Twist come the Gribbles. The whole Gribble family is here. Mr. Gribble is played by Frankie Holden. Frankie was a singer in Old 55, a 50s band popular during the 70s, and became an actor in the 80s and then a presenter in the 90s. Matron Gribble is played by Judith McGrath, who had a long-running part in Prisoner Cell Block H as Colin Powell, and would go on to have another long-running part in All Saints, a hospital drama, among other roles. The younger Gribbles are Gribble Jr., played by Lachlan Jeffrey. Lachlan had a couple of other acting roles and worked as a production assistant during season 2 of Round the Twist. Rabbit was played by Stuart Atkin, who also appeared in Neighbours and Blue Heelers, and Tiger was played by Cameron Nugent. Nugent went on to have other acting roles and then studied TV and film at university. He is now a director, writer and producer. He does a bit of everything. Damn, I was hoping to introduce each character one at a time to break up the bio dumps, but I forgot that they all turn up pretty much at the same time in this episode. As the Gribbles and the Twists introduce themselves, Bronson runs up to report that someone was in the dunny, but he didn't see them. Gribble Jr. gives him the first mention of dead Ned, who died on the John. The Gribbles invite themselves in, getting through the door before the Twists have even had a chance to look at their new place. How rude. Everyone starts exploring the lighthouse. The kids are excited, rushing up the stairs, claiming bedrooms and swapping insults with the Gribbles. Mr. Gribble starts trying to talk Tony into selling the lighthouse. It seems Tony got a great deal, as Nell was going bust and Gribble was too overextended to buy it himself. Nell hears some talking and accuses Gribble of stealing a painting she had planned to sell to raise money to keep the lighthouse. Meanwhile, the kids have got to the top of the lighthouse and found an old storeroom full of dusty junk and instruments. The Gribble kids start messing with the stuff immediately. The adults arrive slower and more out of breath than the kids, and as I'm now in my 40s, I can sympathise with the adults. The Gribbles go back down immediately, Mrs. Gribble complaining about the dust and damp. Nell explains to Tony that the junk was her brother's and she'll clean it out soon. Tony, being nice, tells her there's no hurry. Nell never cleans out this room. During the exploration of the lighthouse, the Gribbles give Bronson the legend of dead Ned, saying he was left in charge of the lighthouse while Nell was overseas. But when she returned, all she found was his skeleton on the dunny. Bronson is scared. The poor kid's only 7. He decides he's not going to eat, so he won't need to use the toilet. But Bronson's a hungry kid, and it's chocolate chip ice cream for pudding. Bronson is known for being hungry and smelly, and Rodney McClayan gives us the most grounded performance of the 3 actors who play him. He gives Bronson all of his traits without overplaying them, making the character more believable in this series than any other. We see Bronson unpacking in his room. He has an Atari ST with Zor loaded up and he's rocking out to the MIDI music. Then the urge comes upon him. He needs to go to the loo. So he asks his sister Linda to go with him. Linda is practicing her martial arts. Linda is a fiercely independent young woman. She's into martial arts, environmental causes and feminism.
Where do you come from, darling?
My name is Linda, sweetheart.
I see. A feminist.
Tamsin West's Linda is the most physically active. She actually uses her judo a few times in the series and takes part in sporting events. This drops away in later series, with her judo being referenced but not seen on screen. Linda's not taking Bronson to the loo, so he asks his brother Pete. Pete's rocking out with his guitar. Pete's an occasional musician, constant joker and wannabe ladies man. Sam Vanderberg's Pete is more of a joker than the Petes that follow. The other Petes do get occasional jokes, but Sam's Pete has them non-stop. He also won't take Bronson to the loo, and Dad's busy playing with dinosaurs. So Bronson braves the bog in the dark. But soon he's harassed by a ghostly peeper. Why is there a hole in the side of the dunny for peeping? Some questions are best left unanswered. Bronson's dad reassures him that there are no such things as ghosts. But when Linda goes, Bronson is worried, so he keeps an eye on her. A bit too close of an eye. So she calls out for Nick Hoff. I don't know who this Nick Hoff is, but the Australians are yelling for him all the time.
Nick off!
Nick off.
Nick off!
After Bronson leaves, this guy turns up and looks over the door at Linda. They seem to scare each other, and Linda leaps off the loo, looking ready to rumble with the ghost. Nell's passing by and casually confirms it's the ghost of young Ned. Linda and Bronson try to convince Pete they saw a ghost, but they only get groan-worthy jokes in return. Eventually, Pete puts in his dental plate to come to the toilet with them. This plate is a bit weird. I didn't think you got them for a single tooth, but apparently it's quite common to use them for children while their jaw is developing until they can get a more permanent solution. After this episode, we never see Pete's plate again. Pete goes to the toilet and he's cracking jokes to himself until Ned shows up and scares him so badly he drops his plate right down the dunny. The next day, the kids head down to the waterworks to reclaim Pete's plate. Lovely. They get the plate back from the friendly and poetic sewage worker, and I don't care how long they boiled it, I'd never put that thing in my mouth again. The kids decide to confront Ned, and they all head down to the dunny together. How wide is this seat? Are Aussie toilets designed to be used with friends? The night is stormy, and when Dead Ned arrives, the toilet tears itself apart, revealing Nell's missing painting. Dead Ned can't talk, and they are reduced to a game of charades to work out that he was sorry to scare them, and just wanted to show them where the painting was hidden. His business on Earth complete, Ned flies off to the afterlife, and they reunite Nell with her painting. Tony declares the painting worthless, but Nell says it has value to her. The episode closes out with us seeing that Ned is on the dunny in the painting. Interestingly, Nell said her father was in the painting when she was accusing Gribble of stealing it.
That painting was the early days of this lighthouse. It even had my father in it.
But the only person in the painting is Dead Ned. Unless her father had been painted on the toilet and Dead Ned is just taking over. Who knows? Skeleton on the Dunny is a great first episode of the show, and like all episodes, it's very tightly written. Most episodes of the show feel like they have enough ideas to fill out a 90-minute movie, but they get it all done in 22 minutes. Skeleton on the Dunny has the extra work of having to introduce the twists, the Gribbles and Nell, plus it gives us a tour of the lighthouse and the strange music that plays. But it does all of this and still gives us a good ghost story too. I was surprised to find out that a lot of kids find this episode really creepy. I thought it was quite tame, but I suppose that some of the atmospheric shots of the toilet in the dark could be a bit scary. Other well-remembered episodes of Season 1 include Cabbage Patch Fib, where Bronson is stuck looking after a baby he found in the cabbage patch. Wonder Pants, where Pete's magic pants give him superpowers, before shrinking down to help a frog win a race. And the infamous Noel, where Linda is chased by the Scarecrow Clown. Round the Twist is a story of the week show, and like many TV shows from before the year 2000, it's designed so you can watch any episode and know what's going on without needing to have watched any other episodes. But Round the Twist still manages to have some storylines running through each season. This season we have the ongoing attempts by the Gribbles to get the twists out of the lighthouse so they can sell it to rich developers. Mr. Gribble's character being a complete contrast to Tony Twist. Tony is a free spirit. He moved to the countryside for the inspiration and a better life for his kids. He cares more about having a good life and being free than about what other people think of him. Whereas Mr. Gribble is an estate agent. He's very money focused. He's into flash cars and wants to be seen as a pillar of the community. He will move into politics in later seasons, but we already get the impression that he has a lot of pull with the local council in this first season. His wife, Matron Gribble, is at her best this season. I know it's meant as a joke and an arrogant boast that she has 5 diplomas.
You can't talk to my wife like that. She's got 5 diplomas.
But this, and seeing her at her work, helped to give her her own independent character. Whereas in later seasons, it feels like she gets demoted to just being Mr. Gribble's wife. So throughout the first season, they're trying to get Tony and the kids out of the lighthouse and Nell out of the cottage so they can sell the land to rich developers. And Mr. Gribble keeps bringing various foreign investors to view the lighthouse. We get Arab investors in episode 2, Japanese investors in episode 8, a Texan in episode 10, and finally Mr. Henderson in episode 13, who seems to be vaguely European. Also this season, Tony falls for Bronson's teacher, Faye James, and they date throughout the series. Miss James is played by Robin Gibbs. Robin Gibbs was in Prisoner Cell Block H and Carson's Law before Round the Twist, and was in Home and Away and Blue Heelers afterwards, among many other acting credits. Pete tries dating Fiona throughout the series. She's one of Linda's friends and is played by Daisy Cameron. As well as Round the Twist, she appeared in 5 episodes of Neighbours. Pete does get a kiss in episode 9, Lucky Lips, but they don't really start dating until later seasons. In the final of season 1, Lighthouse Blues, Tony is trying to ask Faye to marry him, but the Gribbles have used their influence over the council to make a compulsory purchase of the lighthouse. They've sold the land to Mr. Henderson. The Twists have finally been able to make contact with the ghosts who were playing the music. It turns out they were Nell's family. They love music, so it's singing that brings the ghosts out. And when Mr. Henderson reveals he's going to blow up the lighthouse, even the Gribbles try to save it. They don't want to be blamed for the town losing the lighthouse. Together with the town, they all sing to summon up the ghosts of Nell's family, who scare Mr. Henderson away. And by the end of the episode, Tony does manage to ask Faye to marry him, getting a non-committal response. Other recurring characters in season 1 include Mr. Snapper, the kids' teacher, played by Espen Storm, the script consultant and director. Mr. Snapper is a strict teacher, but he always seems uncomfortable in conversations with other adults, and it's strongly hinted that he has unrequited feelings for Miss James. And the Gribble Gang are recurring antagonists for the Twist kids. Gribble Jr. is spoilt by his father and has the attitude that he can do whatever he wants. Tiger and Rabbit are his friends, but he's very much the leader of the group, telling them what to do. Rabbit is big and strong, but not very smart, and Tiger is the mouth of the group, often providing commentary on events and school activities. The energy that Cameron Nugent gives him in the first series is insane. The first series, Around the Twist, was very popular with audiences, with the BBC already expressing an interest in a second season before the show had even begun in Australia. And with ABC Australia also putting money in for a second series, the team got to work. Unfortunately, the kids were growing up fast and already looked too old for their roles. So Patricia Edgar took the decision to recast all the child actors. This can be a bit jarring if you're watching the show in a long binge, but all the actors do a really good job and you soon get used to the cast changes. So let's have a look at season 2. Oh, but first we need to talk about the theme song. It's so good, and I know you can all hear it in your heads even if I can't play it for you without getting an instant copyright strike. The song was written by Andrew Duffield. Andrew Duffield is a composer and writer who has been in, written for and worked with several bands. And he's been a composer and producer in the TV ad space. All Duffield was given to work with was the show's title and a short deadline. All the lines about nursery rhymes, they were just filler intended to be replaced later on, but that never ended up happening. Tamsin West had a background in musical theatre and said she was always singing on the set. As soon as the producers heard the song, they loved it, and now it's been stuck in the heads of everyone who watched the show for 35 years. There are various covers and remixes of the theme song available on YouTube, showing the enduring popularity of the song even now. Season 2 is generally more forward focused than Season 1. There are a lot less ghost stories and a lot more episodes that have themes of environmentalism and even some political topics. These episodes are never too heavy-handed, they merely reflect that environmentalism was a big thing in the early 90s. Paul Jennings is still writing the episodes with Esmond Storm. However, behind the scenes they are starting to have disagreements, and we'll talk more about that later. There are a lot more episodes this season that result in turnabout or karmic justice for the Gribbles. This does happen to some extent in the first season, like when Pete set Old Man Chompers on Gribble Jr. in episode 3, or when the Lucky Lipstick backfired on Gribble Jr. in episode 9. But it starts happening more often and more obviously in season 2, with episode 1, Next Time Around, episode 2, Copycat, episode 6, Sloppy Jalopy, episode 10, Yuckles, and episode 11, Quivering Heap, all ending with a direct reversal on Gribble Jr. This season we're going to look at episode 6, Sloppy Jalopy, as our representative episode. The title sequence shows a person with a unique lifestyle choice, wobbling around the tip on a bicycle. He's probably considered a tramp, but the colourful clothing does make me wonder if he might be some kind of out-of-time hippie. He finds a box containing gold earrings and a tube of toothpaste. Yeah, it's going to take more than a dab of Colgate to clean these rotten gnashers. The show proper starts and Pete and Bronson are getting their ears pierced. Bronson chickens out, but Pete gets a stud. This season, Bronson is played by Jeffrey Walker. Walker had leading roles in other Aussie and New Zealand TV shows, including Mirror Mirror. Check out my video on that time travel drama. He became an award-winning director. Walker's Bronson is a bit more boisterous than in the previous season. He's more independent, and while he still tags along with his siblings, we get 4 episodes this season in which he plays a leading role. Little Squirt, Smelly Feet, Ice Maiden, and Little Black Balls, compared with season 1's Bronson, who was the main focus of the Cabbage Patch fib, but otherwise played supporting parts in the stories. Pete is played by Ben Thomas, who had roles in Neighbours, Blue Heelers, and Genie from Down Under. His Pete still has the funny lines, but fewer than Sam Vanderberg, and he seems more focused on Dates and Fiona this season. Pete's got his new earring, and they find Linda and Fiona getting ready to protest at the waste depot. Linda is played by Jolene Chronograch. Linda is played by Jolene Chronograch, who went on to have roles in Ocean Girl and Raw FM. She directed All the Way to the Top in 2020. Linda is at her most politically active this season, taking part in multiple demonstrations, but Jolene manages to play her with youthful idealism without becoming annoying or overbearing. Fiona, Linda's friend and Pete's crush, is played by Zeta Briggs. She brings a bit of colour to the cast, which is rather monotone in the way many kids' TV shows were at the time. Round the Twist is her only acting credit. The kids join the protest at the Waste Centre, which is being led by Nell. Nell and Mr Gribble are both running for mayor this season. Gribble has some dodgy deals running, allowing the city to dump industrial waste in Port Noranda. Nell, Linda and some of the townspeople are protesting this. We have new actors for Mr and Mrs Gribble this season, while Bunny Brooks returns as Nell. Mr Gribble is played by Mark Mitchell, who has many acting credits, including The Comedy Company, Genie from Down Under, and voice work on The Flaming Thongs. This season, Gribble still wants the lighthouse, but is now more focused on his political ambitions. Mrs Gribble is played by Jan Friedel. Her acting credits include Prisoner Cell Block H, A Cry in the Dark, and Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries. Mr Gribble claims to back down on the waste issues, but sneaks off with the tanker. The Gribble kids begin harassing the tramp we saw at the start of the episode, and when Pete stands up for him, they wrestle and Gribble Jr. loses an earring. The tramp, being a peacemaker, offers the boys the earrings he found at the start of the show, and the kids go their own ways. The Gribble gang has also been recast this season. Gribble Jr. is played by Richie Young, who will come back as a policeman in season 4. He's worked in other acting roles as well as working as a production and location manager. Rabbit is played by Drew Campbell, and this seems to be his only acting credit. Tiger is played by Nick Mitchell, who has gone on to appear in Blue Heelers, Underground, The Julia Assange Story, and most recently Apple Cider Vinegar. The gang is a little different with the new cast. Gribble Jr. is a larger kid and does not need as much muscle backing him up. Rabbit is still simple, but he's not a large and intimidating kid anymore. And Tiger is still the mouth. He does do a good job, but he just can't match the energy of last season's Tiger. The Twist kids follow the Gribbles down to the beach, where Gribble is dumping the sludgy waste. He's practically become a Captain Planet villain this episode. Gribble Jr. pushes Pete in the waste. Luckily, it's not corrosive, but it really stinks. His own family, even Bronson, won't go near him. They return to the lighthouse, where Tony and Faye are discussing where they might live after they get married. Richard Moore returns as Tony, and Robin Gibbs returns as Faye. They can both smell Pete coming, and Tony hoses him down to try and get the worst of the sludge off, but he still smells. Tony goes to find Mr Gribble to talk about this waste, and Pete goes for a long shower, but he's still smelly, so he splashes on some Old Spice. And then he puts in his new earring. As he considers another shower, he gets attacked by a used tissue. Then the contents of the bathroom bin rush over him. Pete goes to his siblings for help, declaring that the sludge is making the rubbish stick to him. But rather than being helpful, his siblings, especially Bronson, take delight in finding rubbish items to launch towards Pete. Tony calls from the waste ground. Gribble Jr. has gone missing. People are worried. He asks them to come to the waste ground. Someone there has something that might get the smell off Pete. So Linda calls a cab, and the cabbie's not too impressed, as Pete's covered in rubbish and any trash they drive past is attracted to the cab. They even pull in the tramp. It gets so bad, Pete has to move to the back of the cab to pull the rubbish away from the windscreen. When they get to the waste ground, the taxi is covered in garbage. The driver has a whole list of charges to get the cab cleaned, but since the kids have no money, he takes Linda's watch and Pete's new earring to hold on to until he gets paid by their dad. But once Pete takes out the earring, the rubbish leaves him alone. But when the cab driver puts it in, the rubbish lurches towards him. They realise the earrings are the problem, and they find Gribble Jr. buried in a huge mound of rubbish. Pete tries to warn him, but the episode ends with the sludge blasting from the tanker all over the Gribbles. So we can see in this episode the environmental messaging that becomes common throughout the season. We also see this messaging in one of my favourite episodes, Little Squirt, when Gribble wants to build on a local beauty spot, and in Yuckles, a slightly weaker episode, when Mr Gribble wants to cut down a section of forest containing the very rare Yuckle plants. Little Squirt is my favourite episode this season, but other well-remembered episodes this season include Nails, where Linda falls in love with a boy with a skin condition who turns into a mermaid, and Grandad's Gifts, where a haunted foxtail eats lemons from a tree to reform its body. We have a few running plots this season, including the well-loved Bronson's Feet arc. In the first half of the season, we have several moments where people are disgusted at the smell coming from Bronson's feet, and we even see him avoiding getting his feet wet in the bath. This all pays off in episode 7, Smelly Feet. Bronson plans to use the stench from his feet to defend a rare giant turtle from the Gribbles. And this is where we get Bronson's well-known battle cry, "Up the pong!" Faye and Tony have an on-again off-again romance this season, as Faye struggles to fit in with the Twist family, particularly not wanting to come between Bronson and Tony. Nell and Mr. Gribble are political rivals this season, with Gribble having resources and money on his side, whereas Nell is forced to sell her opal to fund her political campaign. Ultimately, Nell beats Gribble with 95% of the vote, and Faye and Tony get back together when they see the Lighthouse ghosts reuniting at the end of the season. It's really impressive how the show was able to maintain the quality of the first season, and to retain its identity even with all the cast changes. The second season was just as popular as the first, with the show continuing to find new fans, and people wanted more Round the Twist. However, there was trouble behind the scenes. I'm not going to go too deep into this because I don't want to get involved in other people's drama. Plus, what we do know is quite limited. But during the second season, Paul Jennings and Esmond Storm fell out. Paul Jennings had gone from having a quiet life as a teacher and writer to suddenly getting quite a lot of attention and fame. By his own admission, some of this went to his head, and he wanted greater control of the show. At the same time, Esmond Storm felt that he wasn't being recognised for his contributions to the scripts and to the show. Patricia Edgar tried to bring them together to talk things out, but to no avail. Paul Jennings had had enough. He explains in interviews that while he was working on Round the Twist, that was all he had time to do. He was a writer before the show, and he had other projects he wanted to work on. Not to mention, he was raising a family. When interviewed at the time, or when giving talks in schools, when asked, he would state that there would be no more Round the Twist. And from Paul Jennings, there would not be. However, the show was so popular that people were still asking for more episodes years later. That's something that doesn't happen very often in kids' TV. Normally, kids' shows do a few seasons. The children who watched it grow up and everyone moves on to the next show. But the ACTF was still being approached for new Round the Twist episodes almost 10 years later, with the BBC, the ABC and even Disney Channel Europe all on board to put money into a third season. So Patricia Edgar and Esmond Storm brought together as many people as they could from the previous show, plus some new talent, and got to work on season 3. And this time they were ready to launch into a 4th season, so they wouldn't lose the young cast again. So let's talk about seasons 3 and 4. Okay, let me put my cards on the table. I didn't watch seasons 3 and 4 when I was a kid, so I may be a bit biased. I watched seasons 1 and 2 when I was very small. I didn't even know that these were seasons 1 and 2. It was just a show that was on TV, and it poured straight into my brain, and it left permanent marks. Now by the time seasons 3 and 4 came out, I was a teenager. I had friends, I had other interests, I was out doing other things. I didn't watch seasons 3 and 4, I didn't even know they existed. However, I don't think that's why I don't like them as much. Seasons 3 and 4 are very different to seasons 1 and 2. Are they bad TV? No. But are they as good as the first seasons? No. Now if you watched the later seasons and you enjoyed them, and maybe you even think they're better than the first 2 seasons, that's fine. Write a comment down below and tell me why you're right and I'm wrong. But in my opinion, seasons 3 and 4 are not as good as seasons 1 and 2. The tone of the show has changed. The first 2 seasons of the show are family programs. You could sit down and watch them as an adult with your kids and also enjoy them, like the best Disney Pixar movies or the Spielberg films. But seasons 3 and 4 are definitely kid shows. Why is this? Well, it's hard to put a finger on exactly, but I think it comes down to 3 main things. Number 1, the sound. Seasons 1 and 2 had a very understated score. They used a lot of horns and occasionally even didgeridoo sounds. Weird moments would be highlighted with an almost jazzy sting. In seasons 3 and 4, the soundtrack is much busier, and the highlighted action moments can sound almost cartoonish. Reason 2, the story premises. Seasons 3 and 4 push the show's stories to a cartoonish degree. Whereas the first 2 seasons felt like there was weird stuff happening to a real family, seasons 3 and 4 feel like they're living in a live action cartoon. For example, season 1 had Pete hypnotised into acting like a chicken by his sister, but season 3 has Bronson blow the twins' brains out of their heads, literally. It's like they've taken the stories from being quite weird to totally wacky. Reason 3, Flanderisation. Now this does happen to a lot of shows, as actors and writers build upon characters established by other people, and a particular character's traits become exaggerated to the point of defining them. For example, Bronson. In season 1, he's a kid who can be a bit smelly. In season 2, he gets the smelly feet episode, and he gets a catchphrase, "up the pong," which he uses once or twice outside of the smelly feet episode. But by season 4, he's collecting smells in a cupboard, has elaborate Ghostbusters style equipment, and even becomes a masked hero named Skunk Man. This is no longer an observation that some kids can be a bit smelly. It's an obligation for the Bronson character to make a joke about smells every time he's on screen. Despite all this, I don't think seasons 3 and 4 are bad TV, but I do think that they lost something. Whether that's due solely to not having Paul Jennings on board, or whether it's due to trying too hard to emulate the first 2 seasons, I'm not sure. I also feel that the later seasons lost the touching episodes. Episodes like The Copy, where Linda makes a duplicate of herself, who then fades away in her arms. Or Grandad's Gifts, where Linda restores the fox doll to life. Or Nails, where Linda's first love turns into a merman. Linda seemed to get a lot of the emotional stories. But these stories didn't just make you laugh or gross you out. They made you feel for the characters and left you thinking about them long after they were over. The only episode that comes close to these in the later seasons is Bird Boy, where Bronson is forced to reflect on how he treated the bird creature while he had it captive. Otherwise, the later seasons are so busy pushing what is gross and funny that they miss out on the touching emotional moments that made the first 2 seasons so special. Now I've spent a couple of minutes bashing seasons 3 and 4, so let me tell you about my favourite episodes to try and balance the scales a bit. Season 3, The Ice Cream Man Cometh. The title screen opens with Linda eating a living ice cream cone. It's a pretty messed up visual. The episode proper begins with Linda working in the Gribbles' 100% organic ice cream shop. Linda is played by Ebony Massini, who also appeared in Horace and Tina and Blue Heelers. This season, Linda, who has always been strong-minded and feminist, starts pushing the line about being annoying.
That's discrimination. I'm reporting you to... Well, I'm not happy at all.
I'm not blaming this on Ebony Massini. I think it's just the setups and the lines that she has. Anyway, Linda's the only one doing any work, and the customers aren't happy with the service. Nell complains that the ice cream tastes like plastic. Bonnie Brooke passed away in the year 2000 and was ill for a few years before. So Nell is now played by Marion Heathfield. Marion has many acting credits, including Prisoner Cell Block H, Carson's Law, and Neighbours. Her portrayal of Nell is fine, but her character has been reduced so much it feels like she's barely in the show. The Gribbles assure Nell that the ice cream is at least 100% organic and natural. Mark Mitchell returns as Mr. Gribble, and Mrs. Gribble is played by Christine Keogh, who has appeared in Neighbours, Prisoner Cell Block H, and done some directing. The Gribble gang all seem to have jobs in the ice cream shop, even if they're not doing any work. Gribble Jr. is even a trainee manager. The Gribble gang are played by Brooke Skye, Tom Budge and Samuel Marsland. But they have become such an indistinct group of knuckle-dragging mouth breathers that I can't tell them apart. And the show doesn't seem too concerned about this either, treating the 3 characters as interchangeable. In the back room, Linda finds the ice cream is made of nothing but chemicals and artificial everything. And so she's fired. She meets up with her brothers and lets them know that she's looking for another job. This season, Bronson is played by Matthew Waters. As well as his other acting roles, he's appeared in a number of stage musicals. Waters has a lot of energy in the role, but I've already talked about the issues that I have with Bronson this season. Pete is played by Ryan McLean. Ryan had appearances in Home and Away and Neighbours. Pete's changed a bit from the previous seasons. They removed his brain. I've not seen a character degenerate this quickly since Eric Matthews in Boy Meets World. The kids almost walk into Paolo, a real-life travelling gelato salesman. And Linda has a new job with a genuine ice cream maker. Gribble tries to shut him down with bureaucratic requirements, but Paolo casually produces all the required permits, in triplicate. Everything seems great until Linda discovers Giorgio, a human ice cream maker, shut in the back of the cart. He's been in there for his whole life. He doesn't seem too upset, but Linda decides he needs rescuing. The twists come back to rescue him while Paolo's out, but when Paolo reappears unexpectedly, Linda screams at Giorgio to run. He seems overstimulated for a moment, then breaks through the wall of the caravan. The Gribble gang see the twists with Giorgio and follow. Back at the lighthouse, Giorgio is amazed at everything. The sets have been redone for seasons 3 and 4. They've painted all the walls bright colours, so it looks like changing rooms was let loose on the lighthouse. Tony's broken up with Faye, so he's sitting on the couch watching old movies. Richard Moore was not available to return as Tony due to advancing ill health. Andrew S. Gilbert plays Tony for the rest of the show. He's had a long acting career, and people say he's an excellent replacement for Richard Moore and captures many of his mannerisms, which is very generous of them to say. Faye is played by Trudy Hillier. Trudy's acting roles include Frontline, and she's also a writer and director. They take Giorgio upstairs and he makes Bronson an ice cream. This is so creepy and gross, and it makes Giorgio so happy. I love it. He did say he was a human ice cream maker. The Gribble gang are spying on Linda's room from a nearby tree. First of all, don't spy on girls' rooms, that's creepy. Second of all, nearby tree? What tree? There are no tall trees near the lighthouse. Linda tells Giorgio that he doesn't have to make ice cream anymore, but he wants to make ice cream. He keeps Pete and Bronson up all night talking about ice cream trivia and making ice cream machine noises. So the boys lock him in the shed. Not only is this what they were supposed to be rescuing him from in the first place, but it smacks of bullying the neurodivergent. But Giorgio's gone missing and Paolo is out looking for him. When Nell comes by to tell them how great the ice creamery has become, they realise that the Gribbles must have Giorgio. Mr. Gribble has him tied up in the back of the shop and is force feeding him the chemical flavourings. This results in a rainbow of spew when the Twists come to rescue him. Linda apologises to Giorgio. She's sorry that she made decisions on his behalf, but he says he's happy that she showed him the world. But when Linda gives him a peck on the cheek, he turns into a gelati machine. It turns out Giorgio's under a gypsy spell. It's like Pinocchio, but with an ice cream machine. Linda kisses the machine and he turns back into a real boy, or as close as Giorgio's ever going to get. Paolo is so happy to have him back, he makes Giorgio a full partner in the ice cream business. The Ice Cream Man Cometh is one of the good episodes from season 3. Giorgio is a gross but charming idea, and Linda seems to learn something about not making decisions and assumptions about other people. Season 3 also includes Whirling Derfish, also known as the Whirly Willy episode, which is quite popular amongst fans, as well as Toy Love, which is a pretty creepy living doll episode. The running storyline this season is the Viking Book of Love. Vikings visit Port Noranda in the second episode and leave their Book of Love with Linda. Reading poetry from the Book of Love makes people fall in love with the reader. Many shenanigans ensue as people use and misuse the book. Pete uses it on Fiona, apparently having learnt nothing from Lucky Lips. Rabbit uses it on Nell, and even Mr. Snapper uses it on Fiona, breaking up her and Tony for a while. I find this plot device very creepy, and I don't think it's handled as well as Lucky Lips, where at least Pete learnt a lesson about stolen kisses. By the end of the season, one of the Viking women, Helga, returns to reclaim the book. She's played by Rachel Bowen and gives a really fun performance. This season also introduces a new character called Anthony. Good name. He's the brain box or professor character, and he's the one who invents the machine that blows Pete and Linda's brains out their heads. Anthony was played by Ruben Liversridge, who was also in an episode of Driven Crazy, another Paul Jennings show. Season 4 followed quickly as Season 3 was a success. Season 4 is much the same as Season 3, although Esmond Storm is no longer playing Mr. Snapper. He's now played by Ernie Gray, who also appeared in the ACTF shows Genie from Down Under and Thunderstone. Gray's Snapper has a much more nervous energy than Esmond Storm's. For this season, I'm going to talk about episode 3, Linda Godiva. Linda's found an old perfume sprayer, and she's extolling the virtues of a reusable container to her class, but she looks foolish when the sprayer doesn't work. I think this might be why Linda comes across as so much more annoying in these seasons. The scripts intentionally undercut her. The rise of reusable containers and the reduction of single-use packaging has become a trend in recent years. Linda was actually ahead of her time. Mr. Gribble gets to address the class. He's looking for volunteers. At an upcoming fair, Mr. Gribble wants to prove that his ancestor completed a historic horse riding route and that he did it by beating his rival who used a different route. They're going to reenact the ride, with Gribble Jr. playing the part of his horse riding ancestor. So Mr. Gribble needs a volunteer to play the rival and race Gribble Jr. around the ridge. The horsey girls in class all volunteer, but Mr. Gribble insists on having a boy. Pete puts his hand up because the horsey girls are, not paying attention to what he's volunteering for. As I said, they removed his brain. Not wanting to let the horsey girls down, Pete goes ahead even though he doesn't know how to ride. So after school he begs Linda for help. Linda is a great horse rider, although this has never been mentioned before and will never be mentioned again. But Linda's distracted. She's discovered that the perfume sprayer can turn her invisible. It also puts her head in the bottle. It's weird. Also, her clothing stays visible, so she just strips off and runs around nude. She uses her invisibility to mess with her brothers, and then breaks her dad's art sculpture, which just seems mean. Then she quickly gets dressed for Pete's horse riding lesson. Pete is terrible at horse riding, and Bronson's collecting smells. Moving on. The horsey girls come round and Pete struggles to keep up the charade to impress them. He's supposed to be dating Fiona this season, by the way, but he's a terrible boyfriend. The Gribbles come round just to taunt Pete, but when Linda gets sprayed with horse poo, she decides she's all in on beating Gribble Jr. And Bronson's still collecting smells. Moving on. Linda uses her invisibility powers to follow the Gribbles into the boys' changing room and overhear their plans. Then she steals their clothes, just for the fun of it. Gribble Jr. plans to swap out with a professional jockey and then swap back with him near the finish line. So Linda decides she'll ride the horse for Pete and reveals her invisibility power to her brothers. On the day of the race, the Gribbles think Pete's gone mad as he's talking to his invisible sister. But they set off and Pete lets Linda do the driving. Gribble switches out with the jockey and the race is on. Linda has the horse at a full gallop, which is very hard on Pete's It's very hard on Pete, but he's even more upset when Linda boasts about feeling like Lady Godiva, and he realises he's on a horse with his naked sister. Gribble switches back, and luckily he's almost as bad a rider as Pete. At the finish line we see Pete's stunt double driving the horse as fast as he can. It's a close run race, but Pete and Linda win, but Mr. Gribble accuses Pete of cheating. But then Bronson shows a recording of Gribble Jr. cheating, and Mr. Gribble falls in horse poo. Moving on. Pete's boasting about his great ride, but then he leans on the perfume bottle and reveals Linda in all her glory. Linda doesn't have Lady Godiva's hair to preserve her modesty, so she rides off quick. Lady Godiva is not a bad episode, but season 4 is generally the weakest in my opinion. Dog by Night is another season 4 episode that stood out to me. Pete gets bitten by a vampiric circus flea and turns into a were-dog, which leads to Pete falling in love with a local female dog. It's so messed up that it's almost good. And the episode Skunk Man indulges in the worst excesses of the later seasons of the show. But to be fair, I can imagine small kids probably enjoy all the smelly boy jokes. This season's running storyline is the knight who keeps popping in. She sort of looks like a rejected extra from Nightmare, and Pete thinks she's a guy for some reason. In the final episode, it's revealed that she's from the Isle of Dreams, the last remnant of Atlantis. She's looking for a mate, as Atlantis has a population problem. She wants Pete because he's so persistent and loyal and kind and brave, and I think she must have been watching a very heavily edited version of this season. All of the kids can go to the Isle of Dreams, including the Gribbles for some reason. The island is perfect, and when the kids get there, they will all become perfect, and they have to decide if they want to go by sunset. Of course, they decide they can't go, as they can't leave their lives and their families. The other running story this season is Faye's pregnancy. Tony and Faye try to hide the pregnancy from the kids, but they all seem to know about it. In the final episode, Faye has the baby, and Pete suggests that they name it Ariel after the knight from the Isle of Dreams. Despite my personal opinions, seasons 3 and 4 were very popular, and even won awards. So for a few years after season 4 finished, there was talk of a Round the Twist movie, but they were never able to secure funding, with studios nervous about the risk of taking the show from a television series to a full movie. And so the show came to an end, but it never really faded away. Whether it's the classic version of the show or the later seasons, the show keeps finding new fans. The show was repeated on TV for years and broadcast in over 70 different countries. It had a VHS release as soon as the first season was broadcast, and DVDs of all 4 seasons are still readily available. And the show is now available on streaming services and on YouTube. This means that parents are now able to introduce the show to their kids, bringing a whole new generation to Round the Twist. And one of these old fans was Paul Hodge, an award-winning writer and composer who has written the 2024 Round the Twist musical. A chance comment by one of his relatives when they were changing a Pongy nappy reminded him of Bronson's Up the Pong catchphrase, just as he was looking for a new theatrical project. Paul Hodge was able to gain the approval of both Paul Jennings and the ACTF, and has based the musical on the first 2 seasons of the show. What's the show like? I have no idea. It's only on in Australia, and that's a hell of a long way to go to watch a musical. But I do like the idea of a Round the Twist musical. It just makes sense to me, with the show's theme song providing so much of its identity. Not to mention, I think some of the feelings that the characters go through in the show could easily come bursting out of them in song. If the musical does come to the UK, I'd be one of the first in line to see it. There are some trailers and promotional videos for the musical available on YouTube, as well as a video of Paul Jennings trapping Tamsin West in a lift. It definitely looks like a lot of work and effort, not to mention money, has gone into the musical. But what I found most interesting about the musical were the interviews with Paul Hodge, where he seemed to be able to verbalise something that I had been struggling with. Why did Round the Twist, or at least the first 2 seasons, stick with people for so long? It comes down to the writing. Like Roald Dahl before him, Paul Jennings seems to be able to tap into what it feels like to be a child, and the worries and the concerns that children and adolescents have. About feelings and challenges that may seem small or insignificant to adults, but are very, very important when you're a child. Not to mention the difficulties of navigating life in a changing body. Paul Jennings manages to channel these feelings into incredibly imaginative stories. And in Round the Twist, these were adapted without having all the rough edges sanded off. Things that executives and focus groups might say that you shouldn't or couldn't do on television, but that are ways to address thoughts, feelings and worries that kids genuinely do have. This interference was something that even the best adaptations of Roald Dahl's work couldn't avoid. But this is where we come back to that wonderful confluence of people: Patricia Edgar, Espen Storm, Paul Jennings and all the other wonderful people who worked on the Round the Twist TV show. People who weren't interested in creating role models, but who wanted to make interesting, engaging and funny television. People who were concerned with making a great show. We may never see a show like Round the Twist again. In a world so focused on creating instant smash hits with the broadest possible audience, studios are not prepared to take risks on letting creative people do their work. But we can all be very glad that in the early 90s everything lined up to give a group of people the space to make something very wonderful and uniquely Australian. And so there's only one question left to ask. Answers in the comments below please. Have you ever felt like this? And now you can go and check out my video where I rank and review every episode of Round the Twist. Or if that's not out yet, you can watch this video that YouTube thinks you'll like. I've been Anthony Robin. You can call me Tony. Bye-bye.